Imagine a little boy, innocent and full of life, who brushes against death and returns, bringing with him a message so powerful and unsettling that it leaves even the most faithful questioning everything. In a small Nebraska town, Todd Burpo, a local pastor, and his wife Sonia live a modest life, raising their 2 children with a strong foundation of love and faith. Their youngest, 4-year-old Colton, is an energetic, curious boy who lights up every room he enters. Unfortunately, his parents, sister, and even the boy could not have predicted the dark turn their lives would take. It started with what seemed like an ordinary illness. Colton complained of a stomachache that grew worse with each passing day. His parents assumed it was just the flu. However, as his cries intensified in desperation and his tiny body endured excruciating pain, they grasped the gravity of the situation. A frantic rush to the hospital confirmed their worst fears. Colton's appendix had burst, spreading toxins throughout his body. His life hung by a thread. Todd and Sonia encountered an unimaginable nightmare. As doctors raced to save Colton, the little boy's condition deteriorated rapidly. His pulse slowed, his breathing faltered. The Burpos could only sit in the waiting room, helpless, praying for a miracle. As surgeons worked to save Colton's life, something extraordinary was happening. The situation defied logic, medicine, and reason. Later, when Colton woke up, he started describing things that no one could understand. He said he saw the doctors operating on him. He described his parents waiting anxiously in separate corners of the room, his mother crying, his father pacing. He described the conversations they were having, word for word. He said he left his body and entered a place filled with light, warmth, and music, unlike anything he had ever heard. He claimed to have met angels, seen incredible colors, and even spoken with Jesus himself. He described heaven as a place where time didn't seem to exist, a world overflowing with love and light. He also brought back a chilling message, one that would haunt his family and leave them questioning the very nature of life and death. Colton Burpo was not an ordinary 4-year-old, but this was not solely due to his near-death experience. Shortly after his surgery, he began to share fragments of his experience. It wasn't an elaborate confession or a grand declaration. Instead, his story unfolded in casual, almost innocent statements. One day, as his parents sat by his bedside, Colton looked up and said matter-of-factly, "I saw you, Mommy. You were on the phone crying. And Daddy, you were praying so hard in the corner." During the surgery, Sonia had been on the phone, sobbing uncontrollably, while Todd had been pacing the hospital floor, his head bowed in desperate prayer. These were details Colton couldn't have known. He had been unconscious, his body struggling to survive, yet he recounted these moments with the clarity of someone who had been standing right there. He spoke of angels who sang to him, of colors so vivid they didn't seem real, and of a man with a beard and ocean eyes who he said was Jesus. "He really loves the children," Colton told his parents one night, his voice filled with conviction far beyond his years. He even described Jesus' scars, marks on his hands and feet that matched the crucifixion wounds described in the Bible. However, no one had ever told Colton about those scars. How could a 4-year-old who had only just begun to explore his faith know such specific details? As word of Colton's story spread, the Burpos quickly learned that not everyone was ready to believe. Even within their church community, reactions were mixed. Some viewed Colton's experience as a divine gift, affirming everything they had learned about life beyond death. But others weren't so sure. Could it have been a vivid dream? Could it have been a hallucination caused by anesthesia and the trauma of surgery? Skeptics pointed to studies of near-death experiences, NDEs, suggesting that Colton's visions were nothing more than the result of oxygen deprivation to the brain. Todd and Sonia couldn't entirely dismiss these theories. They had their own questions too. Was their son truly describing heaven, or was this just a child's imagination running wild? What made it harder to dismiss, however, were the details. Colton spoke of meeting his great-grandfather, Pop, a man who had died decades earlier. When Todd showed him old family photos, Colton identified Pop immediately, not as the elderly man Todd remembered, but as a younger version of him. How could a 4-year-old recognize someone he had never met, especially in a way that even his father didn't expect? And then there was the moment that stopped Sonia's heart. Colton said he met a sister in heaven. Not Cassie, he explained, referring to his living sibling, my other sister. Sonia broke down in tears. Years earlier, she had suffered a miscarriage, a loss she and Todd had kept private, even from Colton. Yet here he was, describing the girl with warmth and clarity. She's so happy, Colton told them. She can't wait for you to come to heaven someday. Sonia struggled as well. She wanted to embrace her son's story and believe that her lost child was waiting for her in a better place. But the sheer reality of it was almost too much to bear. Faith should provide comfort, not overwhelm. Yet every time Colton spoke about heaven, it felt like their world shifted, as if they were standing on the edge of something vast and incomprehensible. And then came the moment that turned awe into fear. Colton told his parents that Jesus had given him a message. It's not your time yet. There's work for you to do. For Todd and Sonia, Colton's story became both a blessing and a burden. They couldn't ignore the incredible hope it brought, proof of heaven, of love, of something greater waiting for them. But they also couldn't shake the sense that this wasn't just a comforting vision. It was a call to action, a reminder that life is fleeting and that what comes next might be closer than we think. Children have a way of seeing the world that adults often forget. To them, life is full of magic, mystery, and possibilities. They don't carry the weight of cynicism or overthink the way grown-ups do. That's what makes the words of 4-year-old Colton Burpo so hauntingly powerful. It wasn't just what he said about heaven that struck his family and everyone around him. It was how he said it. Simple, honest, and without hesitation. It's difficult to dismiss the clarity of a child who doesn't yet understand doubt or skepticism. Colton didn't try to convince anyone of his story. He simply shared it the way a child would describe their favorite game or a fun trip to the park. And that innocence, the unshakable confidence in his words, is what made his tale so extraordinary. Colton didn't understand the weight of his experience. He had lived through heaven, so recounting it wasn't a big deal. One moment, he was in the hospital. The next, he was up there, as he called it, in a place filled with light, music, and love. He spoke about it as casually as he might describe the color of his favorite crayon. I saw Jesus, Colton said with the certainty of someone who had just met a neighbor. He described Jesus as kind, with eyes like the ocean and hands that bore scars. Those scars, marks of the crucifixion, were something Colton wouldn't have learned about at his age. Yet he spoke about them as if he had seen them himself. His descriptions of heaven were vivid, yet childlike, animals in vibrant colors, flowers that glowed, and music that seemed to come from everywhere. Colton mentioned that Jesus had a rainbow-colored horse, a detail that made his parents smile in wonder. To an adult, these details might seem like the creations of a child's imagination, yet Colton believed it was as real as his toys at home. What makes Colton's account so gripping isn't just the details, but the purity of how he tells it. Children don't have the same filters adults do. They don't tailor their words to what they think people want to hear. Colton's innocence gave his story an authenticity that even the staunchest skeptics found difficult to ignore. For his parents, however, this purity came with its own challenges. Todd and Sonia, grounded in their faith, had always believed in heaven. But when Colton began sharing his experiences, it made them question whether their own faith was strong enough. Could they embrace what their son was saying, knowing how impossible it sounded? Could they let go of the part of them that wanted to explain it away as a dream or the effects of anesthesia? In one particularly moving moment, Colton told his parents about meeting his sister in heaven, a sister he didn't even know existed. Sonia had miscarried years earlier, A heartbreaking loss the family rarely discussed, especially not with Colton. But here he was, describing a little girl who told him she was happy and waiting for her family to join her someday. "She said she couldn't wait to see you," Colton told his mother, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. Sonia broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the innocence of her son's words and the way they echoed a truth she had buried deep in her heart. There's something uniquely disarming about the way children tell stories. Colton's words were free of theological jargon or elaborate explanations. He wasn't attempting to conform his experience to the preconceived notions of his education. He simply shared what he saw, felt, and remembered. When he spoke about Jesus, it wasn't in the distant, abstract way adults sometimes do. "He loves us so much," Colton said, his voice full of conviction. It wasn't a lesson he had memorized in Sunday school. It was a truth he had experienced. For Todd and Sonia, this simple declaration was both beautiful and terrifying. If heaven was real in the way their son described, what did that mean for their lives here on earth? Colton's innocence didn't just make his story believable, it made it universal. His sincerity moved everyone who heard him speak, whether they were devout believers or hardened skeptics. Years of fear, doubt, and philosophical debates did not cloud his words. They were pure, unfiltered, and direct. And maybe that's why his story carried so much weight. In his innocence, Colton wasn't just sharing an experience. He was delivering a message. He didn't intend to keep his encounter with heaven a family secret. It was a gift, a reminder of something greater, and it took the clarity of a child to deliver it. The doctors didn't sugarcoat the situation. They told Todd and Sonia the truth. Colton's chances were slim. The weight of those words hit them like a tide. Todd, a man of faith who had spent years preaching about God's mercy, found himself questioning whether his prayers would be enough. Mortality, once an abstract concept, became painfully real as they faced the possibility of losing their son. In those desperate moments, Todd and Sonia weren't thinking about theological debates or philosophical questions. They were thinking about Colton, the games he wouldn't play, the birthday candles he wouldn't blow out, the life he might never get to live. As his parents clung to hope and doctors worked frantically to save him, something extraordinary happened. Colton later recounted the sensation of his soul gently rising above the chaos below his body. He witnessed the doctors operating on him, his parents weeping and praying, and then he sensed a place brimming with light. That place, as Colton described it, was unlike anything we can imagine. It wasn't just peaceful, it was alive. Colors shimmered with an intensity that defied description, and music seemed to flow through the air, wrapping him in warmth. There were no clocks, no ticking seconds. Time, as we know it, didn't seem to exist. Colton didn't just see heaven, he experienced it. He met angels who sang to him, saw relatives he'd never met in life, and stood in the presence of Jesus himself. For Colton, this wasn't a dream or a vision. It was as real as the hospital bed he woke up in. While Colton's account brought comfort to many, it also stirred a deep unease. What he described wasn't just a story of peace and love. It carried a weight that left even his parents shaken. Colton's visit to heaven came with a message, one that hinted at urgency and purpose. Jesus told Colton it wasn't his time yet. He had to return to earth because there was work for him to do. But what did that mean? For Todd and Sonia, those words were both reassuring and chilling. If heaven is real, then so is everything else, the responsibilities, the consequences, the choices we make in life. Colton's story reminds us that death is not the end. It's a threshold, a doorway to something far greater than we can comprehend. But with that revelation comes a question. Are we truly prepared for what lies beyond? Colton's story reignited an age-old debate. What is the afterlife? Is it a physical place, a state of consciousness, or simply the end? For people of faith, his account was a validation of what they had always believed, that heaven is real and that there is more to life than what we see. For skeptics, it raised questions about the mind's capacity to create vivid experiences during trauma. Was Colton's journey a divine encounter or the result of oxygen deprivation? Could it have been his young brain piecing together fragments of Sunday school teachings into a vivid hallucination? And yet, there were details that no scientific explanation could fully dismiss. How did Colton recognize a relative he had never met or seen in photos? How could he describe events that happened while he was unconscious, moments no one had told him about? These mysteries defy easy answers, leaving believers and skeptics alike to wrestle with the unknown. For Todd and Sonia, Colton's journey offered both comfort and challenge. Colton's journey reminded them not only of the promises of their faith, but also of the responsibilities that accompany it. If heaven is real, and Colton's story suggests it is, then life is more than a collection of moments. It is a test, a preparation for something greater. If you felt inspired, moved, or even challenged by this story, now's your chance to act. By clicking Super Thanks, you're not just watching. You're becoming part of a journey that spreads hope, faith, and purpose to countless others. For many who hear Colton's story, there's a mix of emotions: hope, doubt, awe, and even fear. What if heaven is real but we're not ready? What if we still have more work to do, more love to give, and more faith to embody before we reach that threshold? These thoughts can be unsettling, but they can also inspire change. Fear doesn't have to paralyze us. It can push us to think differently, to act with intention, and to embrace the life we have with gratitude and purpose. And that's the power of Colton's story. It doesn't just tell us about what might happen after death. It challenges us to live better today. Whether or not you believe Colton's account, his story taps into something universal. Every culture, every religion, and every person has grappled with the mysteries of life and death. What lies beyond has fascinated and frightened us for as long as humans have existed. Colton's story doesn't claim to have all the answers, but it offers a window, a small, breathtaking glimpse into what might be. And that glimpse forces us to confront some of life's biggest questions. What do we believe? What do we hope for? What are we doing to prepare for the unknown? In the end, Colton's experience reminds us of one profound truth. Life is fragile, but it is also filled with purpose. His story isn't just about a boy returning from death. It's about the choices we make while we're alive. It's about faith, love, and the possibility of something more. What will you do with the time you have? Will you prepare for what's to come? Will you live a life that echoes beyond the confines of this world? Colton's story doesn't give us all the answers, but it leaves us with a question. Are you ready to face eternity? Thanks for watching, joining our community by subscribing to this channel. Until the next video.